"God, please, I don't want to die," a little girl cried out, abandoned and alone. But then a millionaire saw her and did something that shocked the world. You have to see what happens next. Let me know what you thought of this story in the comments with a rating from 0 to 10. I'm dying to know if you liked it, and please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm really counting on you. The baby's desperate cry echoed along the muddy banks of the Cyprus River as Lily tried to rock him in her trembling arms. Her 4 years of age seemed insufficient to carry the weight of Leo, who was only 3 weeks old, but she had no choice. The old backpack slipped from her small shoulders, too heavy for a child, but containing everything that was left of her former life. The murky waters of the river reflected the grey sky of a March afternoon in Bayou's Bend, deep in rural Louisiana. Lily looked at the abandoned wooden shack before her, its planks rotting and its roof riddled with holes that would offer little protection. This was where she needed to spend the night with Leo, far from the debt collectors who had taken their home 3 days after her father's burial. Owen Scott had been a well-respected fisherman in the region, known for his honesty and his profound knowledge of the Cyprus River's waters. Lily remembered her father's calloused hands, teaching her to identify the fish, the stories he told about the river's secrets, the gentle way he cared for Leo in the baby's first weeks of life. But now Owen was gone, taken by a sudden fever that no medicine could overcome. The girl pushed open the creaking door of the shack and entered the damp, foul-smelling space. Spiderwebs hung from the corners, and the dirt floor was covered with dry leaves the wind had blown in. Lily placed the backpack on the ground and settled Leo on the only piece of clean fabric she owned, a towel that had belonged to her mother. Inside the backpack, besides the few clothes she'd managed to save, was the handgun her father kept for protection. Owen always said a man alone on the river needed to be prepared for any situation, though Lily had never seen him use the weapon. Along with the handgun, wrapped in plastic to protect it from moisture, was a paper her father had always guarded with extreme care. Lily couldn't read, but she recognized the drawings that seemed to map a place near the river. Lily's stomach rumbled with hunger. She hadn't eaten since the previous morning when a kind neighbor had offered her a piece of bread. Leo was also restless, needing milk she had no way of getting. The situation seemed impossible for a 4-year-old child, but Lily had inherited her father's iron will. As she tried to calm the baby by humming a tune Owen used to hum, a strange sound from the back of the shack made her freeze. It was a low noise like heavy, ragged breathing. Lily hugged Leo tighter and moved slowly toward the sound. In the darkest corner of the shack, partially hidden behind fallen planks, was an injured panther. The animal, a medium-sized female, had a wounded front paw and was breathing with difficulty. Its yellow eyes fixed on Lily and the baby, and the girl realized she was facing a life-or-death situation. The panther had come down from the hills in search of water, following the river's course until it reached the abandoned shelter. The animal was weak and injured, likely from a territorial fight or an accident, but it still posed a mortal danger to the children. Lily backed away slowly, her heart beating so loudly she was sure the feline could hear it. With careful movements, the girl managed to reach her backpack and pull out her father's gun. Her small hands could barely hold the heavy handgun, and she had no idea how to use it, but she vaguely remembered seeing Owen check if it was loaded. The cold metal trembled in her hands as she pointed it in the direction of the panther, which began to move toward her. Leo chose that moment to cry louder, a sharp wail that agitated the panther. The animal, though wounded, displayed its predatory instincts as it positioned itself to attack. Lily closed her eyes and squeezed what she thought was the trigger, but the gun didn't fire. Her hands were shaking so much she could barely keep it pointed. It was in that moment of absolute terror that the sound of an approaching engine echoed from the riverbank. Powerful headlights illuminated the inside of the shack through the cracks in the wood, and a horn blared repeatedly. The panther, startled by the intense light and sudden noise, hesitated in its advance. Arthur Vance had decided to take a different route that afternoon, driving along the riverbanks to check the limits of his rural property. At 52, the businessman who owned a small auto parts factory was used to solitude. 3 years had passed since his wife Catherine had left without explanation, leaving him in an empty mansion on the outskirts of Bayou's Bend. When he saw the faint light coming from the abandoned shack and heard a baby's cry mixed with sounds he couldn't identify, Arthur stopped his truck and got out to investigate. What he found surpassed his worst fears. A small girl pointing a gun at an injured panther while holding a baby in her arms. Without hesitation, Arthur switched his vehicle's high beams on, aiming them directly at the shack, and began honking insistently. The noise and intense light made the panther retreat, confused and intimidated. The animal, already weakened, decided this was not the time for a confrontation and dragged itself in the opposite direction, disappearing into the vegetation along the river. Lily let the gun fall to the dirt floor, her legs finally giving way to the weight of fear and exhaustion. Leo continued to cry in her arms, but now it was tears of relief that streamed down the girl's dirty face. The tall man who had gotten out of the truck approached slowly, his hands outstretched in a sign of peace. Arthur had never encountered such a desperate situation. The sight of that child trying to protect a baby from an injured panther hit him like a punch to the gut, awakening protective instincts he thought he had lost forever. His eyes quickly scanned the deplorable state of the children. Dirty, torn clothes, obvious signs of malnutrition, and especially the look in Lily's eyes, which mixed terror and determination in a way that shouldn't exist in a 4-year-old. "It's all right now," Arthur said in a soft voice, crouching to be at Lily's level. "The animal's gone. You're safe." The girl watched him with suspicion, hugging Leo tighter. Years of a hard life beside her fisherman father had taught her to be wary of strangers, but something in the man's voice reassured her. "The baby's hungry," Lily murmured, her small voice almost inaudible. "I don't have any milk for him." Arthur felt his heart clench as he realized the impossible responsibility this child carried alone. Without a second thought, he extended his arms toward her. "Come with me," he said. "I have food and milk at home. You need medical care too." Lily hesitated for a moment, looking at the backpack on the floor where her father's gun and the mysterious map lay. Arthur noticed her glance and gently picked up the backpack, handing it to her to carry herself. The drive to Arthur's farm took only 15 minutes, but for Lily it felt like an eternity. Sitting in the back seat of the truck, she watched the dashboard lights and the clean, organized interior of the vehicle, so different from the simple life she had known. Leo had stopped crying, lulled by the smooth motion of the truck. The Vance estate stretched over several acres in the hills surrounding Bayou's Bend. The main house, a 2-story building with a wide porch, had been the dream come true for Arthur and Catherine years ago. Now, however, the place seemed too big and too quiet for one man alone. The lights on at the main entrance created a welcoming atmosphere that Lily hadn't experienced in weeks. Arthur carried Leo, while Lily held her backpack tightly, climbing the steps to the porch. Mrs. Gable, the elderly housekeeper who cared for the house 3 times a week, had prepared dinner before leaving pots of warm food on the stove. The aroma of fried chicken and beans made Lily's stomach rumble audibly. "First, let's take care of the little one," Arthur said, heading to the spacious kitchen. Lily watched him prepare a bottle of warm milk, his movements showing an unexpected familiarity with infant care. She didn't know that Arthur had lost a child years before, a pain he kept in absolute silence and which now resurfaced with renewed force. Leo sucked down the milk with desperate voracity, his tiny fists clenching and unclenching as he fed. Lily sat at the kitchen table, her large eyes scanning every detail of the room. The shiny stainless steel pots, the modern refrigerator, the organized cabinets. It was a world completely different from the shack on the riverbank where she had grown up. "What's your name?" Arthur asked as Leo finished the bottle. "Lily," she answered quietly. "And this is my brother Leo. Our daddy was named Owen Scott." The last name made Arthur pause for a moment. Scott was a common name in the region, but something about it sounded familiar, as if he had heard it before in a context he couldn't quite remember. After feeding Leo, Arthur prepared a generous plate for Lily. The girl ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were a royal feast. Between spoonfuls, she told him fragments of her story: her father's sudden departure, the men who came to collect debts, the flight to the abandoned shack. Arthur listened in silence, his indignation growing with each detail. "Do you have any relatives who can take care of you?" he asked. Lily shook her head, but something in her eyes suggested there was more to the story. In truth, she vaguely remembered an aunt, her father's sister, but Owen had always spoken of her with bitterness, mentioning that she had abandoned them when they needed her most. After the meal, Arthur showed Lily one of the downstairs guest rooms, an airy space with a queen-sized bed and a makeshift crib he had assembled using padded drawers. The girl put Leo to sleep, and for the first time in days felt she could completely relax. The backpack remained beside the bed, always within reach of her small hands. The next morning, Arthur awoke to the sound of Leo crying. He went down to the children's room and found Lily trying to soothe him, but the baby seemed inconsolable. A quick check revealed that Leo had a high fever, his skin hot and flushed, indicating a possible infection. "We need to get him to a doctor immediately," Arthur said, grabbing his truck keys. At the Bayous Bend Hospital, Dr. Henry Morgan examined Leo carefully, his concerned expression making Lily cling to Arthur's pants. The doctor, an experienced man in his 60s, noted not only the baby's signs of dehydration, but also the poor conditions the children had been living in. "The baby needs to be admitted for a few days," Dr. Morgan informed them after the tests. "Severe dehydration and signs of a respiratory infection. As for the girl, she also needs medical care. She's clearly malnourished." Lily panicked at the thought of being separated from Leo, clinging to Arthur like an anchor. It was during the admission process that the first bureaucratic problem arose. The head nurse, Susan Miller, asked about the children's documentation and Arthur's relationship with them. When he explained he had found them abandoned, Susan informed him that it would be necessary to contact municipal social services. "Mr. Vance, I understand your good intentions," she said, "but there's a protocol to follow. Abandoned children need to be assessed by Child Protective Services." Arthur felt his world crumble as he realized his attempt to help could result in the permanent separation of the children, sending them to some cold, impersonal institution. That same afternoon, while Leo was receiving fluids and medication at the hospital, an unexpected visitor arrived at the farm. Brenda Scott, 42, showed up at the main gate driving an old, dented car. Owen's younger sister, she had received news of the children's fate through acquaintances in Bayous Bend and decided to claim her rights as the closest relative. Brenda was a woman of unkempt appearance, with poorly maintained clothes and a strong perfume that failed to mask the smell of cigarettes. Her small, calculating eyes scanned Arthur's property with obvious interest, assessing the value of everything she saw. There was something predatory in her posture that made Arthur instinctively distrust her intentions. "I've come to get my niece and nephew," she declared without preamble. "I'm the only family they have now. My brother always wanted me to take care of the children if anything happened to him." Arthur knew that Lily had denied having relatives, but he couldn't legally question Brenda's blood rights. The conversation unfolded on the porch, with Brenda demonstrating a suspicious knowledge of the assets Owen had left behind. She casually mentioned the existence of some savings her brother had put away, and her eyes gleamed unsettlingly when she asked about the children's personal belongings. "Did the girl bring anything with her?" a Brenda questioned, trying to sound casual. "My brother was always careful with his documents and other important things." Arthur realized there was much more behind this visit than simple family concern. Arthur watched Brenda with growing suspicion as she circled the porch, her eyes scanning every detail of the property as if assessing its value. There was something deeply unsettling in the way she spoke about the children, as if they were objects to be claimed, rather than traumatized human beings who needed care and affection. "I need to see the documents proving your relationship," Arthur said, crossing his arms. Brenda rolled her eyes impatiently and pulled an old ID and some yellowed papers from her purse. "Here's my birth certificate, showing Owen was my brother, and this is the will he made 2 years ago, naming me as the children's guardian if anything happened." Arthur examined the documents carefully. Everything seemed legitimate, though he noticed the will had been notarized in Shreveport, far from Bayou's Bend. "If you are the legal guardian," he asked, "why didn't you show up sooner?" "The children were abandoned in a shack by the river." "I was traveling for work," Brenda lied easily. "I only heard about my brother's passing yesterday. I came as soon as I could." In truth, she had spent the last few weeks in Shreveport with a married man who promised to leave his wife and only decided to return when she heard through acquaintances that Owen had hidden some money somewhere. That afternoon at the hospital, Lily stayed by Leo's side, who slept deeply after receiving medication. The girl held her backpack firmly, refusing to let it out of her sight even when the nurses suggested she rest. Something in her childish instincts warned her of imminent danger. Dr. Morgan approached the bed where Leo was admitted, carrying test results. "The baby is responding well to treatment," he informed Arthur, "but I need to talk to you about something important." The doctor led Arthur to a more private corner of the room. "The tests revealed something interesting about the boy. He doesn't show signs of chronic malnutrition, as would be expected if he had lived in precarious conditions since birth." Arthur frowned, confused. "What does that mean?" Dr. Morgan consulted his notes before answering. "It means this baby received adequate care in his first days of life. Someone fed him correctly and took good care of him before he came into your hands. The malnutrition and dehydration are recent, likely from the last few days." This information deeply disturbed Arthur. If Leo had received proper care initially, where was the person who had been caring for him? Why did a well-cared-for child end up abandoned with a 4-year-old girl? The questions multiplied without apparent answers. Meanwhile, at the farm, Brenda took advantage of Arthur's absence to explore the property. She was familiar with the stories Owen told about the special places near the river where he fished, and she suspected that some of these stories involved more than just fishing. Her brother had always been too discreet about his activities, and she was sure he had hidden money somewhere. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, arrived for her afternoon duties and found Brenda snooping in the room where the children had slept. "Can I help you with something?" the elderly woman asked, suspicious of the stranger's presence. Brenda smiled forcedly and explained she was the children's aunt, but Mrs. Gable, with her 70 years of life experience, immediately recognized the kind of person she was dealing with. "Those poor little children have suffered so much," Mrs. Gable commented as she made the bed. "Mr. Arthur has a heart of gold to care for them like this." Brenda pretended to agree, but her thoughts were focused on finding out where Lily had kept her father's belongings. At the hospital, Helen Fisher, a social worker from the county, arrived to assess the children's situation. A competent woman of 35, she had been called by the hospital administration to regularize the children's custody. Arthur received her nervously, knowing this conversation would determine the future of Lily and Leo. "Mr. Vance, I understand you found these children in a state of abandonment," Helen said, consulting her notes. "I need to better understand the circumstances and evaluate the options available to them." Arthur reported everything that had happened, from the encounter at the shack to Leo's hospitalization. "The problem," Helen explained, "is that a relative has appeared claiming custody of the children. Brenda Scott has presented documentation proving she is the father's sister and the legally appointed guardian." Arthur's heart sank upon hearing these words. "But can you assess whether she offers suitable conditions to care for them?" Helen nodded professionally. "That is precisely my function. I will conduct a full assessment of the situation before making any decision." At that moment, Lily, who had been pretending to be asleep, opened her eyes and approached the adults. "I don't want to go with Aunt Brenda," she said with a firm voice despite her young age. "Daddy always said she was mean." "Why did your father say that?" Helen asked, crouching to be at the girl's level. Lily hesitated, trying to organize fragmented memories. "She fought with Daddy a lot. She said ugly things about Mommy after she died. Daddy would get sad when she came to the house." Arthur felt a glimmer of hope. If he could prove that Brenda was unfit to care for the children, he might be able to keep Lily and Leo under his protection. "Helen, can I officially apply to adopt these children?" The social worker studied Arthur's face, assessing his sincerity. "It's a complex process, especially for a single man. You would have to undergo psychological, social, and financial evaluations. It would take months to be approved, even with your clear affection for the children." That night, back at the farm, Arthur found Brenda waiting in the living room, sitting on the sofa, as if she owned the place. She had prepared a list of demands she considered the children's rights: access to all the savings left by Owen, the family's personal documents, and any valuable object Lily had brought with her. "That backpack the girl carries," Brenda said casually, "belonged to my brother. I'm sure it contains important family items." Arthur noticed the poorly disguised greed in her voice. "Lily can decide for herself what she wants to share. She has been through a terrible trauma." "A trauma that could have been avoided if you had contacted me immediately," Brenda retorted acidly. "Instead, you decided to play adoptive father with children who don't belong to you." Her words hit Arthur like daggers, especially because they touched on the secret pain he carried about his own inability to have children with Catherine. The next morning, Leo was discharged from the hospital, but Dr. Morgan made a point of speaking privately with Arthur before the release. "There's something about this case that bothers me," the doctor confessed. "The baby shows signs of having been born in a hospital setting, but there are no birth records for him in any hospital in the region." "What does that mean?" Arthur asked, holding Leo in his arms as the baby slept peacefully. "It means someone is hiding information about this child's origin. It could have been a birth registered in another city, or—" Dr. Morgan paused, as if carefully considering his next words. "Or there could be more complex issues involving the real identity of the parents." When Arthur arrived at the farm with the children, he found Brenda waiting with a lawyer. Nolan Shaw, a thin man in his 50s with cheap suits and questionable ethics, specialized in family dispute cases where he could profit from quickly paid fees. "Mr. Vance," he said in an official tone, "my client has come to pick up her niece and nephew. We expect your cooperation to avoid legal trouble." Lily, who had been silent the entire trip, finally burst into tears upon seeing Brenda. "I don't want to go! I don't want to go!" she screamed, hiding behind Arthur. "Daddy Arthur, don't let me go with her!" The way she referred to him as Daddy Arthur struck Arthur like a lightning bolt, awakening in him a fierce determination to protect these children. "I will fight for them," Arthur declared, looking directly at Nolan. "If it's a legal battle you want, then so be it. These children deserve someone who truly loves them, not someone only interested in what they might possess." Brenda smiled coldly, knowing she had the legal advantage, but not realizing she had awakened a far more determined adversary than she had imagined. The tension in the farmhouse living room was palpable as Nolan shuffled through legal documents, and Brenda watched Lily's every move with calculating eyes. Arthur held Leo tightly, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had taken on and the growing determination not to abandon these children he already considered his own. "Mr. Vance," Nolan said, adjusting his cheap glasses, "we understand your good intentions, but the law is clear. Blood relations take precedence, especially when there is legal documentation establishing guardianship." He held out a copy of Owen's will. "This document was notarized 2 years ago. It's indisputable." Arthur examined the paper again, noticing details he had missed before. The will was dated March 15th, 2021, but something about Owen's signature seemed off. As an experienced businessman, he had developed a keen eye for irregularities in documents, and that signature didn't flow naturally. Lily remained hidden behind Arthur, whispering softly, "Daddy never liked her. He said she only showed up when she wanted something." Her childish words contained an intuitive wisdom the adults couldn't ignore. Brenda pretended not to hear, but her face hardened slightly. "I need time to consult my own lawyer," Arthur declared. "I'm not handing over these children without guarantees that they will be safe and well cared for." Nolan and Brenda exchanged irritated glances, but they knew they couldn't force an immediate transfer without a court order. "Very well," Nolan agreed reluctantly. "We'll give you 48 hours to get your affairs in order. After that, we will return with a judge's order if necessary." Brenda stood up abruptly, her frustration evident. Before leaving, she addressed Lily directly. "Little girl," she said in a falsely sweet voice, "you know that little backpack you're carrying belonged to your father, don't you? I'm sure he kept important things in there, things that could help you and your brother have a better life." Lily hugged the backpack tighter, her instincts warning her of the danger. After the unwanted visitors left, Arthur immediately called Robert Miles, his lawyer and longtime friend. Robert was known in Bayou's Bend for his competence in family law and his unwavering integrity. "Robert, I need your help urgently. It's about 2 children I'm trying to protect." Robert arrived at the farm late that afternoon, carrying a briefcase full of legal forms and a serious expression. After hearing the whole story, he shook his head gravely. "Arthur, the situation is complex. Blood ties do carry significant legal weight, but there are possibilities if we can prove the aunt is unfit." "What do I need to do?" Arthur asked, determined to explore every option. Robert consulted his notes. "First, we'll request a complete social investigation into Brenda Scott. If she has a history of financial problems, issues with alcohol, unstable relationships, anything that demonstrates she's unfit to care for children." While the lawyers talked, Lily played quietly with Leo in the adjacent room. The baby had recovered quickly from dehydration and now smiled frequently, especially when he saw Lily or Arthur. The bond between the siblings was evident and touching, but Robert noticed something that intrigued him. "Arthur," he said quietly, "I've been watching the baby interact with you. He shows a familiarity with you that's unusual for a 3-week-old you've only known for a few days." Arthur frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Robert hesitated before continuing. "Babies form bonds quickly, but the way Leo responds to you suggests a deeper connection, almost as if—" The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Helen Fisher, who had come to conduct her promised social evaluation. The social worker carefully observed the interaction between Arthur and the children, taking detailed notes on the home environment, the quality of care provided, and especially the emotional well-being of Lily and Leo. "Mr. Vance," Helen said after completing her observation, "it's evident that you have developed a genuine bond with these children and they with you. Lily especially shows a trust and affection that are the result of consistent and loving care." Adersons, Arthur felt a flash of hope, but Helen continued cautiously. "However, I must be honest. Brenda Scott has presented solid legal documentation and, as a blood relative, has preferential rights under the law. Unless we find concrete evidence of her unfitness, it will be difficult to contest her custody claim." That night, after Helen had left, Lily approached Arthur as he prepared dinner. "Daddy Arthur," she said shyly, "can I tell you a secret?" Arthur knelt to be at her level. "Of course, little one. You can tell me anything." Lily looked around to make sure they were alone, then carefully opened her backpack. From inside, she pulled out a folded, yellowed paper she had carefully protected since her father's death. "Daddy always looked at this paper when he thought I was asleep. He said one day this would help our family." Arthur unfolded the paper and was surprised to see it was a crude, hand-drawn map, showing landmarks he recognized as belonging to his own property. The map clearly indicated a specific location near the river, with a mark that seemed to indicate something buried. "Lily," he asked gently, "do you know what your father buried in this place?" The girl shook her head. "I don't know, but he said it was for hard times, for when we had nothing left." Arthur studied the map more closely and realized the location was well within the boundaries of his farm, near the river's spring, where he sometimes went to fish. The next morning, Robert arrived with disturbing news. "Arthur, I hired a private investigator to check into Brenda Scott's past. What we've discovered is troubling." He opened a folder full of documents and photographs. "She has a history of abusive relationships, alcohol problems, and several debts in Shreveport. More importantly," Robert continued, "we found out she abandoned Owen and the children 5 years ago when his wife was sick. She only showed up twice since then, always asking for money." Arthur felt indignation rising in his chest. "So she has no real bond with the children?" "Worse than that," Robert revealed. "We discovered that the will she presented was made during one of the visits where she pressured Owen for money. He was desperate and signed the document to get rid of her, but there's evidence he tried to revoke it later." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Brenda was in Nolan's office planning her next move. "That rich man isn't going to give up easily," she grumbled. "He needs to understand that those children belong to me now, along with everything my brother left hidden." Nolan leafed through legal codes, looking for loopholes that could speed up the process. "The problem is, he has the resources for a prolonged legal battle. We need to act fast before he finds ways to question your documentation." Brenda smiled maliciously. "Leave that to me. I have my ways of applying pressure." That afternoon, Arthur decided to follow Owen's map to the river's spring. He took Lily with him, feeling she had a right to be present if they were to discover something that had belonged to her father. The walk through the property was pleasant, with Lily pointing out plants and animals she recognized from her wanderings with Owen. When they reached the location marked on the map, Arthur began to dig carefully. After a few minutes, his shovel hit something solid. It was a metal box wrapped in plastic, carefully buried for protection against moisture. Inside the box, they found a considerable amount of cash, more than Arthur expected a simple fisherman to be able to save. Along with the money was a letter from Owen addressed to "Whoever cares for my children." The letter revealed that he had discovered illegal fishing activities in the region and had been receiving payments to keep quiet about influential people involved in the scheme. The money was his way of securing the future for Lily and Leo in case something happened to him. "Lily," Arthur said carefully. "This money belongs to you and Leo. Your daddy worked very hard to save this for you." The girl nodded solemnly, understanding the importance of the moment even at her young age. "Daddy Arthur, can you take care of the money for us? I don't want Aunt Brenda to get it." That evening, Robert returned to the farm with a triumphant expression. "Arthur, we found the loophole we needed. Brenda's will has technical irregularities that could invalidate it. More importantly, I got a preliminary hearing for tomorrow with Judge Maria Helena Ribeiro. She's known for prioritizing the well-being of children over legal technicalities." But the joy was cut short by a phone call that would change everything. Dr. Morgan called from the hospital, urgency in his voice. "Arthur, you need to come here immediately. We just received the results of some DNA tests I ordered as a precaution. There's something about Leo you need to know." Arthur's heart pounded at the urgency in Dr. Morgan's voice. Holding Leo in his arms, he looked at Robert with an expression of growing panic. What could be so serious about a 3-week-old baby? Robert frowned, equally concerned by the mysterious call. "I'm going with you," Robert said, grabbing his car keys. "If this has legal implications for the custody case, I need to be there." Lily, sensing the adult's tension, held tightly to Arthur's hand. "Is Leo sick again?" she asked in a small, frightened voice. "I don't know, little one," Arthur answered honestly, "but we're going to find out together." During the drive to the hospital, 1,000 terrifying possibilities raced through Arthur's mind. Did Leo have a serious illness, something that explained why he had been abandoned with Lily? At the hospital, Dr. Morgan awaited them in his office with a grave expression, surrounded by piles of tests and medical documents. His formal posture indicated the conversation would be more serious than any of them expected. "Please, have a seat," he said, gesturing to the chairs in front of his desk. "Dr. Morgan," Arthur began, "what did you discover about Leo that's so urgent?" The doctor took a deep breath before answering, as if carefully organizing his words. "The DNA tests I ordered revealed something completely unexpected. Leo and Lily are not biological siblings." The silence that followed was deafening. Arthur looked at Lily, who was innocently playing with a rag doll on her lap, not understanding the magnitude of the revelation. "How is that possible?" Robert asked, his lawyer's instinct taking over. "If they're not siblings, how did Leo end up in Owen's care?" Dr. Morgan consulted his papers before continuing. "There's more. We got a DNA sample from Leo and compared it with hospital records in the region. The baby was born at St. Catherine's Hospital in Shreveport exactly 3 weeks ago, registered as John Smith, clearly a fake name used by someone who wanted to hide the child's real identity." "Shreveport," Robert repeated, a suspicion growing in his mind. "That's where Brenda was living for the past few years." Dr. Morgan nodded gravely. "Exactly. And there are more disturbing details. The baby was registered as having been born via natural delivery, but was abandoned at the hospital after 2 days. The person who registered him left only a fake address." Arthur felt as if the floor was moving beneath his feet. So Leo was abandoned by someone in Shreveport and somehow ended up with Owen in Bayou's Bend. The complexity of the situation was revealing itself to be far beyond what anyone had initially imagined. "There's an even more disturbing possibility," Dr. Morgan continued, hesitating. "Based on the timing and circumstances, there's a chance that Leo is the child of someone close to the family. Someone who had reasons to hide his identity and then abandon him with Owen." Robert immediately grasped the legal implications. If Leo is not Lily's brother, then Brenda has no automatic rights over him. She can only claim custody of Lily as her biological niece. Arthur felt a mix of relief and concern. Perhaps he could keep Leo, but that would mean separating the children who saw each other as true siblings. That night, back at the farm, Arthur wrestled with the dilemma of whether or not to tell Lily the truth. How could he explain to a 4-year-old that the baby she protected with such care was not really her brother? He decided to hold on to the information for now, until he understood the whole situation better. But the problems were just beginning. The next morning, Brenda appeared at the farm, accompanied not only by Nolan, but also by 2 sheriff's deputies. She had obtained a preliminary order to take Lily immediately, claiming urgency due to inadequate conditions at Arthur's house. "This is a valid court order," declared the older deputy, a man in his 60s with a weary expression. "The minor Lily Scott is to be handed over to her legal guardian immediately." Arthur felt desperation wash over him. Robert was still on his way with documents challenging the order, but he would be too late. Lily, realizing what was happening, began to cry desperately. "I don't want to go. Daddy Arthur, don't let her take me." She clung to Arthur's legs with a strength that surprised everyone. Leo, as if sensing the girl's anguish, also began to cry in his crib. Brenda watched the scene with ill-disguised satisfaction, but her eyes were focused on Lily's backpack. "Come on, girl," she said with false sweetness. "You'll like your new house. And you can bring your little toys, too." She reached for the backpack, but Lily hugged it tighter. "That's mine!" Lily shouted. "Daddy gave it to me." Arthur realized the backpack contained not only personal belongings, but also important evidence about Owen's savings. If Brenda gained access to the map and the information about the hidden money, she would have exactly what she came for. The deputy, seeing the child's distress, hesitated. "Mom, perhaps it would be best to give the girl a few minutes to calm down and say a proper goodbye." Brenda protested, but the deputy was firm. "We are representatives of the law, not executioners. The child has a right to a dignified transition." Arthur used these precious minutes to kneel at Lily's level. "Little one, listen carefully to what I'm about to say," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "No matter what happens, you must always keep your backpack with you. Never let anyone touch it, understand? It's your inheritance from your daddy." "But I want to stay with you and Leo," Lily sobbed. Arthur felt his heart break, but he forced a brave smile. "It will only be for a little while, I promise. Daddy Arthur will find a way to bring you back home." A day he kissed her forehead and whispered, "Be strong, my little warrior." Lily's departure was one of the most painful moments Arthur had ever experienced. Seeing that brave child being taken against her will, clutching her backpack as if it were her only anchor of safety, awakened in him a protective fury he didn't know he possessed. Alone with Leo in the silent farmhouse, Arthur called Robert desperately. "She took Lily. They got a court order and took her." Robert, on the other end of the line, was also in a panic. "Arthur, I discovered something terrible about Nolan. He's not just Brenda's lawyer. They have a personal relationship. He's the married man she was living with in Shreveport." The revelation hit Arthur like a thunderbolt. "Does that mean this whole process is being manipulated?" Robert confirmed the worst suspicions. Worse than that, if Nolan is Leo's father and Brenda was living with him, then they planned this whole thing together. They abandoned the baby with Owen, expecting him to die soon after, so they could claim both the children and any inheritance. Meanwhile, in the modest house Brenda had rented on the outskirts of Bayou's Bend, Lily was discovering that her worst fears about her aunt were coming true. The environment was dirty and unkempt, with liquor bottles scattered around the living room and a strong smell of cigarette smoke ingrained in the old curtains. "Now give me that backpack," Brenda ordered as soon as they arrived. "I need to check if there's anything dangerous in there." Lily backed away, clutching the backpack to her chest. "No, Daddy Arthur told me to keep it." Brenda lost her patience and tried to snatch the backpack by force, but Lily ran and locked herself in the bathroom. "Stubborn girl!" Brenda yelled, pounding on the door. "You will obey me, whether you like it or not." But Lily, even at only 4 years old, had inherited her fisherman father's determination. Sitting on the cold bathroom floor, she hugged her backpack and quietly hummed the song Owen used to sing when she had nightmares. That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. Leo seemed to feel Lily's absence, crying more than usual and refusing to be completely soothed. As he rocked the baby in his arms, Arthur made a decision that would change everything. No matter how much it cost or how long it took, he would bring Lily back and keep this family together. What he didn't know was that on the other side of town, Lily had made an equally determined decision. Hidden in the bathroom of Brenda's house, the brave little girl was planning an escape that would surprise everyone and reveal secrets no one expected to uncover. The early morning in Bayou's Bend was chilly as Lily silently managed to open the bathroom window of Brenda's house. At just 4 years old, she showed a courage and determination that would astound any adult. With her backpack tied to her back, the girl squeezed through the narrow opening and dropped into the backyard without a sound. Brenda was sleeping heavily on the living room couch, an empty bottle of cheap whiskey beside her. Alcohol had been her constant companion since bringing Lily home. Frustrated by the girl's resistance to handing over the mysterious backpack, Nolan had called several times during the night, pressuring her to get access to Owen's belongings as soon as possible. Lily knew the streets of Bayou's Bend well, thanks to the walks she took with her father when he went to sell fish at the Central Market. Her small feet instinctively led her toward Arthur's farm, but the distance was too great for a child to cover alone in the dark. Exhausted after walking for 2 hours, she hid behind a church in the center of town and fell asleep, hugging her backpack. It was there that Father Anthony found her the next morning when he arrived to open the church. The 65-year-old priest had dedicated his life to caring for the community's needy and immediately recognized the signs of a child in distress. "Little girl, are you all right?" he asked gently, crouching beside Lily. "I need to go home," Lily murmured, still drowsy. "I need Daddy Arthur and Leo." Father Anthony had heard rumors about the custody battle stirring the town, and his pastoral instincts alerted him that this was the child at the center of the controversy. "Come, let's go inside the church. It's getting cold out here." Meanwhile, at the farm, Arthur was startled awake by Leo's intense crying. The baby seemed inconsolable, as if he physically felt Lily's absence. Robert arrived early, bringing urgent news from his overnight investigations. "Arthur, I've found something that could change everything," he said, showing documents he had obtained during the night. "I gained access to the complete hospital records from Shreveport." Robert continued with growing excitement. Leo wasn't just abandoned at the hospital. He was initially registered as the son of Catherine Vance. The name of Arthur's ex-wife dropped like a bomb in the morning silence of the farm. Arthur felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. "Catherine, but she said she was infertile, that she couldn't have children. That's why our marriage—" Robert shook his head gravely. "She lied, Arthur. Not just about her infertility, but about much more. Leo is your biological son." The revelation was devastating. Arthur remembered the last weeks of their marriage when Catherine had become distant and nervous. She had fabricated a work trip to Shreveport that lasted almost a month, returning changed and determined to end the relationship. Now it all made sense. She had discovered the pregnancy, fled to hide the birth, and abandoned her own son. "But how did Leo end up with Owen?" Arthur asked, still processing the information. Robert consulted his papers. "Owen occasionally worked as a fisherman for suppliers in Shreveport. It's likely Catherine found him there and convinced him to take the baby, perhaps by promising payment or inventing some story." That morning, the discovery of Lily's escape spread panic through the town. Brenda woke up with a terrible headache and took a few minutes to realize the girl was gone. Her first reaction was to call Nolan, but then she realized she needed to act cautiously. If the authorities found out she had lost a child under her legal care, she could face serious consequences. Father Anthony, meanwhile, had taken Lily to the church kitchen, where he prepared a simple but nutritious breakfast. The girl ate with appetite while telling her story in simple words, laden with emotion. "Aunt Brenda wants to steal Daddy's things," she explained, hugging the backpack. "But Daddy Arthur told me to keep everything." The priest observed the determination in the child's eyes and made a decision. "Lily, do you want me to call Daddy Arthur?" The girl's eyes lit up with hope. "Is he going to come get me?" Father Anthony smiled warmly. "Let's find out together." Father Anthony's call came at the exact moment Arthur was about to leave to search for Lily. "Mr. Vance, I have a brave little girl here who's asking for her Daddy Arthur," the priest said with gentle humor. Arthur felt relief flood his chest. "Father, thank you so much. I'm on my way to get her right now." On the way to the church, Robert updated Arthur on the legal implications of the new discoveries. "With proof that Leo is your biological son, you have indisputable paternal rights over him. As for Lily, her escape clearly shows she doesn't feel safe with Brenda, which strengthens our case." At the church, the reunion between Arthur and Lily was emotional. The girl ran into his arms as if she had found a safe harbor after a storm. "Daddy Arthur, she wanted to take my backpack, but I kept everything like you told me to." Arthur hugged her tightly, silently promising that he would never let anyone separate her from him again. Father Anthony watched the interaction with satisfaction. "The love between you is evident," he commented. "This child has found her true family." But the peace was interrupted by the arrival of Brenda and Nolan, who had tracked Lily to the church through witnesses who saw her walking in the early morning. "That girl belongs to me," Brenda shouted, her disheveled appearance testifying to her night of drinking. "She ran away from my house like a criminal." Father Anthony blocked her path with the moral authority that came from decades of serving the community. "This is God's house. You do not enter here shouting or making threats." Nolan tried to take control of the situation with his usual legal arrogance. "Father, I respect your position, but there is a court order that determines the child's custody. She must come with us immediately." Robert, who had arrived with Arthur, pulled documents from his briefcase with a confident smile. "Actually, Nolan," Robert said with evident satisfaction, "I have here a temporary suspension of custody order issued this morning by Judge Maria Helena Ribeiro. Your client lost a child under her legal responsibility, demonstrating gross negligence." Nolan's face paled as he saw the official documents. "That's impossible. How did you get a hearing so quickly?" Robert smiled. "Let's just say the judge gets very annoyed when lawyers present cases based on fraudulent documents and undeclared personal relationships." The revelation that Robert had discovered the relationship between Nolan and Brenda caused panic in both of them. Brenda tried to deny it, but Robert had photographs and witnesses from Shreveport confirming they lived together. "You planned all of this," Robert accused. "You abandoned a baby, manipulated a desperate man to raise the children, and then plotted to steal the inheritance he left behind." Father Anthony listened to the accusations with growing horror. "My God, you used innocent children for your greedy schemes." Brenda, realizing she was losing, made one last desperate attempt. "That backpack contains things that belong to me by right. My brother owed me money." Lily, who had been silent throughout the argument, finally spoke with a firm voice despite her young age. "Daddy never liked you. He said you only showed up to ask for money and make him sad." The childish but truth-laden words echoed through the church like a final sentence. Arthur picked Lily up and headed for the exit. "Let's go home, little one. Leo is waiting for you." But before leaving, he turned to Brenda and Nolan with an expression of iron determination. "If you ever try to come near these children again, I will make sure you face the full legal consequences of your actions." At the farm, Lily's return was celebrated with genuine joy. Leo, as if sensing his adoptive sister's presence, stopped crying immediately and smiled upon seeing her. Mrs. Gable, who had been informed of the whole situation, prepared a special lunch to mark the reunion of the family that had formed against all odds. But there was still one last secret hidden in Lily's backpack, something that would reveal an even more surprising truth about Leo's true origin and the role Catherine had played in this whole complex story of abandonment, love, and redemption. That afternoon, with Lily finally safe at home and Leo quiet in his arms, Arthur felt he could breathe for the first time in days. The farm had regained its atmosphere of a welcoming home, but Robert still had a worried expression that indicated not all the mysteries had been solved. "Arthur," Robert said, as he organized documents on the kitchen table, "we still need to understand exactly how Leo got to Owen. Catherine simply abandoning the baby with a random fisherman doesn't make sense." Arthur rocked Leo gently, observing the serene face of the baby he now knew was his son. Lily, playing on the floor with a rag doll, looked up upon hearing the adults' conversation. "Can I tell a secret?" she asked shyly. "Daddy sometimes talked about a pretty lady who cried a lot near the river." Arthur and Robert exchanged significant glances. "What do you mean, little one?" Arthur asked gently, sitting on the floor beside her. Lily hugged her doll as she organized fragmented memories. "Daddy said a lady brought Leo on a night when it was raining hard. She was crying and said she couldn't keep the baby." Robert leaned forward, interested. "Lily, do you remember anything else your father said about this lady?" The girl thought for a moment. "Daddy said she was very sad and was afraid of someone. He promised to take care of Leo because she begged him to." The revelation painted a completely different picture of the situation. Catherine hadn't just abandoned Leo, she had specifically sought out Owen, perhaps because she knew of his reputation as an honest and kind man. But why was she so afraid, and of whom? Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Brenda and Nolan were facing the collapse of their plans. In Nolan's shabby office, they frantically discussed how to regain control of the situation. "That lawyer found out about our connection," Nolan grumbled, drinking directly from a bottle of cheap whiskey. "You guaranteed me the plan was foolproof," Brenda accused, pacing back and forth. "Now we've lost both the girl and access to the money my brother hid." Nolan laughed bitterly. "The money is the least of our problems now. If they find out the truth about Leo..." The conversation was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of an elegant woman who walked into the office without knocking. Catherine Vance had returned to Bayou's Bend after a 3-year absence, and her appearance caused instant panic in Nolan. "What are you doing here?" he stammered, knocking over the whiskey bottle. Catherine observed the messy office and the two conspirators with an expression of disgust. "I came because I heard you're trying to destroy innocent people's lives," she said in a cold but controlled voice. "And mainly because I found out you're using my son as a pawn in your dirty games." "Your son?" Brenda repeated, confused. "What are you talking about?" Catherine smiled without humor. "Leo, the baby Nolan helped me hide, and that you later used to blackmail my ex-husband." The truth was finally coming out, and it was even more sordid than anyone had imagined. Back at the farm, Arthur decided to examine Lily's backpack more carefully, now that she was willing to share its secrets. Besides the map they had followed to find the money, there were other papers carefully folded and protected from moisture. Among them were old photographs that made Arthur's heart stop. One of the photos showed Catherine holding a baby, clearly taken at the hospital. On the back of the image, someone had written, "John, March 15th. It was Leo, still a newborn, and the date confirmed that Catherine had lied about being on a work trip when she had actually given birth. "Arthur," Robert said, examining the photos, "this proves Catherine planned everything from the beginning. She knew she was pregnant, hid it from you, and then orchestrated the baby's abandonment." But there were more photos in the backpack, including one showing Nolan talking to Owen near the river. The last piece of the puzzle fell into place when Robert found a handwritten letter hidden among the photographs. It was from Catherine to Owen, dated 3 weeks ago. "Mr. Scott, as agreed, here is the final payment for the care of John. I hope he has a good life away from all this mess." "She was paying Owen to raise Leo," Robert exclaimed. "It wasn't abandonment, it was a financial arrangement." Arthur felt a mixture of anger and sadness as he realized the extent to which Catherine had lied to him. She wasn't infertile, she had had his child, and then she had paid to hide the child from him. That night, as he put the children to bed, Arthur reflected on the cruel ironies of fate. He had spent years blaming himself for not being able to give Catherine children, when in fact she had hidden from him the son he so desperately wanted. Now, through a series of tragic and miraculous coincidences, that same son had arrived in his arms. Lily, already in her pajamas and ready for bed, approached Arthur with her backpack. "Daddy Arthur," she said seriously, "I want you to keep these things. Daddy said they were important, but I can't read." Arthur accepted the backpack with reverence, understanding that he was receiving not just objects, but the total trust of a brave child. The next morning, Robert arrived with news that changed everything definitively. "Arthur, Brenda and Nolan were arrested last night," he announced with satisfaction. "Catherine reported them for extortion, forgery of documents, and child abandonment. She confessed everything in exchange for judicial immunity." "Catherine spoke to the authorities?" Arthur asked, surprised. Robert nodded. "She told them how Nolan convinced her to hide the pregnancy from you, how they planned to use the baby to extort money from your family, and how they manipulated Owen to participate in the scheme without knowing their true intentions." The full story was even more disturbing. Nolan had met Catherine in Shreveport during a legal conference, seduced her when he learned she was married to a prosperous businessman, and then used the pregnancy to manipulate her. The plan was to make Arthur believe Catherine was infertile, hide the baby's birth, and then use the child as a blackmail tool. "But something went wrong with the original plan," Robert continued. "Owen grew genuinely attached to Leo and refused to hand him over when Nolan tried to retrieve the baby to continue the scheme. That's when they decided to eliminate Owen from the equation." Arthur felt a chill upon hearing these words. "Are you saying they caused Owen's death?" Robert shook his head gravely. "Not directly, but Brenda confessed that she was mixing medication into his food, hoping he would get sick enough that he couldn't care for the children. The fever that killed him may have been aggravated by what she was doing." The revelation that Owen had suffered even more than they imagined made Arthur furious, but also determined to protect Lily from all that sordid truth. The girl had lost her parents tragically, but now she had a new family that would love her unconditionally. Dr. Morgan called that afternoon with the final confirmation from the DNA tests. "Arthur, the tests definitively confirm that you are Leo's biological father. We also found evidence that the baby was incorrectly medicated in his first days of life, likely by someone trying to make him sick." The cruelty of Nolan and Brenda knew no bounds. They had tried to harm an innocent baby to facilitate their criminal plans. Arthur hugged Leo tighter, thanking fate for putting these children in his path before it was too late. That night, as he watched Lily and Leo sleeping peacefully in their rooms, Arthur made a final decision. He would immediately begin the legal processes to officially adopt Lily and register Leo as his son. The two children had been through enough trauma. Now they deserved only love, security, and the chance to be truly happy. But there was still one last surprise waiting for him. A discovery that would connect all the loose threads of the story and reveal a secret that Owen had kept until the end. A secret that would forever change Arthur's understanding of fate and the coincidences that had united this makeshift family. 6 months had passed since Brenda and Nolan were arrested, and life at Arthur's farm had found a sweet, natural rhythm. Lily, now 5, had flourished under loving care, displaying a lively intelligence and a contagious joy that lit up the entire property. Leo, at 8 months, was crawling through the house, exploring every corner with insatiable curiosity. Lily's adoption process was nearly complete, and Arthur had officially registered Leo as his son, finally correcting the injustice Catherine had committed by hiding his paternity. The company was also thriving, with Robert taking on the partnership that a previous colleague had abandoned, bringing new energy and ideas to the business. On that sunny September morning, Arthur was organizing papers in his office when Mrs. Gable knocked on the door with a mysterious expression. "Mr. Vance, a package arrived for you. The delivery man said it was very important and could only be handed to you." The package was small but heavy, with no return address, just his name handwritten in a careful script. Inside, he found an old bronze key and a folded letter. His curiosity was immediately piqued when he recognized the handwriting. It was the same script from the notes on Owen's map. The letter began formally, "For Arthur Vance, the man who cared for my children." Arthur felt his heart race as he realized Owen had written this letter specifically for him, somehow predicting he would be the one to care for the children. "If you are reading this," the letter continued, "it means my suspicions were confirmed and something has happened to me. It also means that Lily and Leo have found someone worthy of protecting them, as this letter was only to be delivered if the lawyer holding it verified that the children were safe and happy." Arthur paused his reading for a moment, processing the information. Owen had planned everything, including the possibility of his own departure. The simple fisherman was far more astute than anyone had imagined. The key accompanying this letter opens a safe deposit box at the Bayou's Bend Central Bank, account number 47518. Inside the box is the complete truth about Leo and about my connection to your family. Arthur looked at the bronze key in his hands, feeling he was about to discover something that would change everything once again. "Arthur," the letter continued, "you don't know me, but I knew you well. I worked for 3 years as a night janitor in your office building, observing how you treated everyone with respect and dignity. I saw how you suffered when your wife left, and I knew you were a man with a good heart." The revelation hit Arthur like a lightning bolt. He vaguely remembered a kind, discreet janitor who always greeted everyone politely, but he had never connected that man with Owen Scott. The fisherman had watched his life from afar, knowing his character even before entrusting the children to the care of fate. When Catherine sought me out on that rainy night, desperate and crying, offering money for me to raise her baby far from Bayou's Bend, I immediately realized something was wrong. A mother doesn't abandon a healthy child without serious reasons. Arthur continued reading with growing fascination. I investigated discreetly and discovered she was being blackmailed by Nolan, who threatened to tell about their affair if she didn't cooperate with a plan to extort money from you. Catherine was terrified, not knowing how to escape the situation without destroying her life and yours. The story became more complex with each line. Owen hadn't just been an innocent bystander. He'd understood the situation better than anyone and had made conscious decisions to protect everyone involved. I decided to accept the child, but on conditions. Catherine had to pay a monthly allowance for his care, and I would keep evidence of the entire situation as protection. I also insisted that if anything happened to me, the children should be brought to you, as I believed you would love them as they deserve." Arthur had to stop reading again, moved by the wisdom and generosity of a man he had barely known. Owen had carefully orchestrated the children's destiny, ensuring they would find love and security even amidst the chaos. "The money you found buried doesn't just come from my work as a fisherman. Part of it is the monthly payments Catherine paid for Leo's care, part is honest savings, and part came from Nolan. Yes, I blackmailed him back, threatening to expose his schemes if he tried to harm the children." The final revelation was astonishing. Owen had protected the children not only with love, but also with strategic intelligence, using the blackmailer's own weapons against them. That afternoon, Arthur went to the bank, accompanied by Robert, carrying the mysterious key and the legal authorization to access the box. The manager, Mr. Daniels, personally led them to the vault room, intrigued by the unusual situation. Inside the box, they found meticulously organized documents, copies of all financial transactions between Catherine and Owen, recordings of phone conversations with Nolan where he revealed his criminal plans, and most importantly, a signed statement from Catherine herself admitting the whole truth about Leo. "My God," Robert murmured, leafing through the documents. "Owen built a complete file that proves everyone's innocence and Nolan's guilt. He was protecting not only the children, but also you and even Catherine." There was also one last letter, this one addressed specifically to the children for when they were old enough to understand. But the most moving discovery was at the bottom of the box. Original birth certificates revealing that Lily was not just Owen's daughter by upbringing. Medical documents showed she had been informally adopted by him when she was just a few months old, after her biological parents died in a fishing accident. Owen saved Lily just as he's saving Leo, Arthur realized. He dedicated his entire life to caring for children who needed protection. The humble fisherman's generosity grew even more impressive with each revelation. That night at the farm, Arthur watched Lily teach Leo how to clap his hands, both laughing with pure, innocent joy. He decided to save most of the revelations for when they were older, but he would share the essence of the story, that they were loved by Owen, protected by him even after his departure, and that they now had a new family that would love them forever. "Lily," he called softly, "come here, little one." When she approached, he hugged her affectionately. "I want you to know that your daddy Owen was a very wise and brave man. He prepared everything to ensure that you and Leo would always have a family that loves you." "I know, Daddy Arthur," Lily replied with the simple wisdom of childhood. "Daddy Owen once told me that guardian angels sometimes wear regular people's clothes. I think you're our guardian angel now." The response touched Arthur deeply, confirming that the children had understood the love that surrounded them. 6 months later, in a simple but emotional ceremony at the Bayou's Bend courthouse, Lily's adoption was officially finalized. She was now Lily Vance, legal sister to Leo and Arthur's daughter of the heart. Father Anthony blessed the new family. Robert served as a witness, and Mrs. Gable cried with joy as if she were the children's grandmother. Arthur's company prospered beyond all expectations, allowing him to create an educational fund for both children and for other needy children in Bayou's Bend. The money left by Owen was used exactly as he had wished, to ensure a bright future for his protégés. Catherine, after serving her time for complicity with Nolan, moved to another state and never tried to make contact again. She had lost the right to know the son she had abandoned, but Arthur saved her story for when Leo was an adult and could decide for himself about any possible reconciliation. 5 years later, on a golden autumn afternoon, Arthur watched from his porch as 10-year-old Lily pushed 5-year-old Leo on the swing he had built under the large tree in the yard. The children's laughter echoed through the property, mingling with the soft sound of the Cypress River that continued to flow peacefully through their lives. Lily had grown into a bright and determined girl, always protecting Leo with motherly affection, while he grew up curious and cheerful, with no shadows of the traumatic past that had marked his first days of life. They both considered Arthur not just a father, but a hero who had saved their lives. That night, as he put the children to sleep, Arthur reflected on the mysterious paths fate had taken. An attempt to save a child from an injured panther had turned into the greatest blessing of his life, a real family built with love, dedication, and the dreams of a wise fisherman who had believed in the fundamental goodness of the human heart. Lily snuggled into her bed, holding the rag doll she had gotten from Mrs. Gable. "Daddy Arthur," she said sleepily. "Do you think Daddy Owen is proud of us?" Arthur kissed her forehead affectionately. "I'm sure he is, my princess. You've become exactly the wonderful children he dreamed you would be." In the living room, looking at recent family photos, Arthur smiled at the genuine smiles of happiness that lit up his children's faces. Owen Scott had planted seeds of love and protection that blossomed into a true family, proving that life's most precious miracles are born when generous hearts choose to love unconditionally, turning tragedies into stories of hope, redemption, and lasting joy. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you so much.